Welcome to my channel, Paradoxum. The purpose of this video is to consider whether we can meaningfully say whether morality is real, rather than a made-up subjective feeling or arbitrary decisions. My position is that it can be made sense of, and I'll be setting out my theory on how that works. I think this can apply to both atheistic and theistic understandings of morality, because both have potential problems with what the nature of morality is. So the outline of my video will be such. I'll set out what I think the problem is for both atheists and theists. I'll then explain my solution to the problem and why I think morality does exist. I'll then give a summary and my final thoughts. The problem. I first started trying to seriously deal with the issue while in university. I believed that morality was meaningfully real, that actions could be good or bad in a universal and non-subjective sense. On the other hand, I had a friend who thought morality wasn't real beyond being a feeling or opinion. Sure, you can act decently towards others to be nice, or because treating people well can make life easier, but morality doesn't meaningfully exist. How then do you convince someone who doesn't already believe in it that morality has more reason behind it than emotional reactions like, ew, that's disgusting, or wow, that's amazing? Why did I even believe in morality? And what am I thinking deep down when I say murder is bad, but helping the poor is good? Another question that could be asked is, why is this question even important? Firstly, I'd say that whether you believe morality is real or not might change how you act or think about issues. The belief that it isn't real could make moral action seem more optional. Also, if you're trying to make claims about justice, right and wrong, principles, or creating a better world, it potentially undermines that if you needlessly give up on a moral foundation to your worldview. For example, I saw a video recently where an atheist vegan was debating with a conservative Christian over whether animals should be killed and eaten. The humanist was very eloquent and seemed to be making good points. But when they got slight pushback from the Christian, asking how they could be speaking about morality, about right and wrong without God, the humanist seemed to back away from moral language straight away, conceding the point. This seemed to me to be unnecessary. Of course, maybe his focus wasn't animal rights, not having an argument about the nature of morality. And if that's the case, fair enough. But in general, it seems to me like there are people who on the one hand want to say that morality is subjective, yet go on to talk about principles, right and wrong, helping others, and a better world. This, as I said, sounds potentially inconsistent. It seems like deeper down, maybe they do actually believe in morality. Personally, when I try to imagine some of the worst things humans can do, and then try to imagine that they aren't fundamentally different from any other action, like making a sandwich for example, something feels mentally inconsistent there. Of course, you could argue that these feelings are just a product of evolution, trying to keep us acting socially. But just because something is promoted by evolution doesn't mean that it isn't real too. Something evolved in the brain can be useful because it captures something of truth. For example, the ability for reason or mathematics. Maybe, a bit like reason, morality captures something about the truth of the world to be taken into consideration when making decisions. So going back to the problem for atheists, I'd say that needlessly giving up on the concept of morality could 1. Make you seem inconsistent and therefore your position weaker, and 2. It can undermine the foundation of aspects of your worldview if you reject the idea of morality being meaningfully real, but still fight for change based on what seems to be good ethics. As for theists, I think the problem for them is made clearer by the Euthyphro dilemma. I'll quote the version of the dilemma by the philosopher Leibniz rather than Plato, since it's more clearly about monotheistic religion. In this version, the problem is this. It's generally agreed that whatever God wills is good and just. But there remains the question of whether it's good and just because God wills it, or whether God wills it because it's good and just. In other words, whether justice and goodness are arbitrary, or whether they belong to the necessary and eternal truths about the nature of things. Essentially, is morality just made up by God, and it could have been different, or does God express a morality which fundamentally is what it is, not based on arbitrary decisions by God? Some people might like the first choice because it emphasises the power of God. Personally, I'd say an issue with this is that it makes morality basically meaningless, no different from following arbitrary orders from an authority. I mean, really, if God appeared before you and told you that murder, slavery, abuse were all morally good, would you really have no issue with that? And if you'd have no problem with that, I would have to question your moral compass and what you think the purpose of morality really is. Just following orders, I guess. On the other hand, if God prescribes morality which fundamentally just is what it is, based on the nature of morality, then what is this nature? The theory. I think my solution to the problem is quite simple, perhaps so simple that it's wrong. But it works for me, and hopefully it might give some people another view which I hadn't considered before. My idea is this. 1. People have subjective goods and bads in their lives, which influences what people think they should and shouldn't do next. For example, eating food generally feels good, and it's good for you to stay alive, so there's a strong motivation saying that you should do that. On the other hand, sticking your hand in a fire feels bad, and it's bad for your health, so there's a strong motivation telling you that you shouldn't do that. Similarly, being punched in the face feels bad, and is bad for your health, so it's something you should avoid. My next step is 2. It's possible to try and view the subjective goods and bads of many individuals collectively and objectively. By this I mean, instead of giving preference to your own subjective goods and bads, you could instead consider the goods and bads of others to be equal to your own when deciding how to act. Arguably, this is the more objective perspective, which also contains more truth about the world. Unless you don't believe that other people exist, it's true that other people's subjective goods and bads exist just as much as your own. And it's more objective not to give preference to anyone and to treat everyone equally, including yourself. This leads me to my conclusion. 3. This objective perspective on subjective motivations for action can fairly be called morality. Essentially, if you consider the subjective goods and bads of all people relevant, the outcome of this can be called the overall good or bad in that situation. Another name for it could be the universal good or bad for that situation, because this objective consideration wouldn't just apply to you, but to all people the same. Therefore, I'd say a consideration of a situation that leads to an objective overall good or bad prescription for action can fairly be called morality. I guess the next question is, does this mean morality is real? It doesn't necessarily exist in a god or in some transcendent form in a parallel world. It's a perspective or a way of viewing and thinking about action. It doesn't exist outside the mind. But this is true of other concepts that we would generally consider to be meaningfully real though. For example, mathematics, logic and reason. Reason wouldn't exist outside a mind, but it can still bring us to a better understanding about the world. In a similar way, morality, as an objective perspective, can bring us to a better understanding about our actions based on more objectivity and truth. Of course, you still have the problem that you can't make someone be moral. They can reject using this perspective and decide to just act on what serves their subjective desires. But this would be true of any conception of morality. Even if it was 100% proven to be true and enforced by God, a person could still choose not to act on it. This is also true of reason in a similar way. People can be unreasonable, but it generally isn't used as an argument to say that reason is useless or meaningless. You simply can't make someone believe in an obligation to be moral, just as you can't make someone believe in an obligation to be reasonable. Yet most people would still believe that you should act morally and reasonably. Considering all this, I think it's fair to say reason is real, being a more objective and truthful way of thinking, and similarly, morality is real, being a more objective and truthful way of acting. The conclusion. In conclusion, 1. People have subjective goods and bads in their lives, which influences what people think they should and shouldn't do next. 2. It's possible to try and view the subjective goods and bads of many individuals objectively. And 3. This objective perspective on subjective motivations for action can fairly be called morality. I'd say his conclusion is somewhat similar to the Golden Rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and the Silver Rule: do not do unto others as you would not have them do unto you. Of course, this doesn't tell you specifically what you should do in any situation, or necessarily what ethical system you should use, but to me it helps answer the question of whether morality is real, or just a feeling. I'm not claiming this idea is perfect, but I think it at least provides a useful view to consider. I don't plan for my future videos to be so abstract. I just thought this was quite foundational, and a good place to start. I expect new videos to be on more specific ethical, political, economic, or entertainment subjects. If you liked this video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you liked, commented, and subscribed. Feel free to post in the comments what you think, or what ethical system you use for morality. Companions, thank you for watching a Paradoxum video.